All right, we'll hear from Adam Sparks here momentarily. Knoxville News Sentinel, beat writer for Tennessee, the Volunteers football team, with Josh Heupel, the head coach. Also today, we'll hear from Graham Couch, who covers Michigan State as they get ready for Ohio State, and have a Heisman Trophy candidate and running back Kenneth Walker III as well. Tennessee, of course, is trying to get back to that big room. They were there for a long, long time, but it's been a tough run. They're 5-5 this year. Just lost to Georgia, but everybody has. And now they have an on-conference game coming up to get themselves bowl eligible. We're joined by Adam Sparks, Knoxville News Sentinel. Adam, was this the minimum ceiling, or I guess the floor, to be bowl eligible with Josh Heupel, or is this ahead of the curve?
No, I mean, this is somewhere in the middle. I remember when I did my preseason predictions, I thought they would go 7-5. I think most others probably said 6-6. They're going to finish 7-5. It looks like they'll win this week. Probably beat Vanderbilt next week. And considering where they were, they got ravaged by the transfer portal. They did not return a whole lot. They were not good last year. They had a lot of quarterback questions that they had to get solved early in the year. I think 7-5 was probably the ceiling. And I will say that at 5-5 right now, they're better than what 5-5 looks like. Had a chance to beat Ole Miss. Should have beat Pitt. Had they already found their quarterback by then, they would have. I will say their outlook, their trajectory over the next few years probably is better than 5-5, because they have one of the better offenses in the country right now. And if you can find anything that you're really good at with a new coach, that's more than most teams can ask for.
How much has Danny White changed things in the Tennessee athletic department, albeit in a very short span?
Well, I mean, he's trying to. I think the big cloud that's hanging over Tennessee is the NCAA violations that they allegedly occurred under Jeremy Pruitt. They've got an investigation that they just wrapped up internally here in the last couple of weeks. They're still waiting on the NCAA to come back with their findings. So I would say Danny White certainly has potential to change a lot of things, and he's already announced a number of facility upgrades that were put in motion a little bit before he came. He's trying to change a lot of things in the athletic department in terms of ticketing and modernizing a number of things that they have. But it's on hold. I mean, he's on pause. If the NCAA comes back and says, we're going to slap you on the wrist, then he can move forward with a lot of things he wants to do. If they come back with major probation, then there's not a whole lot that Danny White can do to push the football program forward.
Adam, what has the experience with Josh Heupel been like? I mean, you talked about Danny White and also expectations, but just his fit in the Tennessee program, the thoughts when he was hired versus now. What's been the reaction from the fan base as far as Heupel's version of the Vols?
Well, I mean, he needed to convince the fan base that he was the right guy. They've been, this has been a number of coaches now since Phil Fulmer that haven't been up to snuff. I mean, Lane Kiffin was loved here for a few months, and then he skipped town, and ever since then, everybody's trying to improve on what they had, and nobody's really hit the mark very well. Heupel was, his personality is so different than his offense. His offense is electric and exciting and all that. His personality is sort of just ho-hum, and that's you have to put out a winning brand of football to sort of overcome that. And so far, UT fans have liked that. I mean, if you win at Tennessee, they don't really care what your personality is. They'll sort of mold their opinion around that. I mean, Phil Fulmer was not a charismatic guy, but he won a national championship. So if Heupel wins, they'll love him, and they like him pretty well so far.
So Hooker, the quarterback, he is senior. I don't know if he's got one of those COVID years left or not. What's the status for them at quarterback in the quarterback room going forward?
Yeah, he's got 1 year left if he chooses to use it. I would advise him to do that. I don't think he's a really, really good pro prospect right now. He's top 10 in the country in passer rating. Every time that I tweet out his updated stats, I get a lot of likes from UT fans. I get far more response though from Virginia Tech fans because this is the age of the transfer portal quarterback, and that's a guy that Hendon Hooker started 15 games there, was serviceable but was never developed, and then he comes to Tennessee and he's one of the top, arguably I'd say one of the top 4 quarterbacks in the SEC, and that leaves a lot of Virginia Tech fans vexed.
Adam, you mentioned the coaches over the years and how that has kind of disrupted things. Was part of the problem that they did not have an AD, like they had Philip Fulmer, and he was trying to run the athletic department like a coach instead of an athletic director?
Yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of leadership changes, president, chancellor, athletic director over this past decade. The move to bring in Phil Fulmer as the athletic director and then to hire Jeremy Pruitt was, it was a mistake because the idea was, we'll bring in a Tennessee guy, a football guy, and he'll fix everything. But the age of the former coach being a successful AD, I think that era ended probably about 20 years ago. And there are exceptions where it works out, but it rarely does. And I think if Tennessee could do it again, they would not have brought him in because you're just spinning your tires at that point. And Jeremy Pruitt obviously was not the right guy for a number of reasons, and they may be paying for that here soon with whatever the penalties are for the violation.
Yeah, is that a major reason it's hurt recruiting? Is that cloud? Because Baylor, we covered Baylor. They had that. People used it against them, although eventually at the end there really wasn't much there that was taken away. I mean, more the delay was probably their probation than anything else.
Sure. I mean, Tennessee is typically in the top 10 in recruiting classes. They're at 31 right now. Josh Heupel has never been known as a really good recruiter. He does have a staff he put together to recruit well, but if you're outside the top 30 at Tennessee, there's got to be more reasons than just the head coach is not a great recruiter. And the NCAA violations are the biggest reason for that. That's being used against them, which I wouldn't blame any school for doing that. One little caveat I'll say, though, is I think Josh Heupel's system, his offense, and even his defense right now is probably better suited for transfer portal guys than it is developmental freshmen. And so that they may find an escape clause here a little bit, that if they're docked some initial signees, they'll maybe be able to make that up with transfer portal guys. Most of their better dynamic players in offense this year have been guys that got out of the portal.
Adam, what's it been like to see them go through this schedule? On paper, one of the toughest schedules in the SEC in the entire country. I mean, how much optimism does that also give? Not only the fact that they're likely going to get bowl eligible this weekend and then maybe even get a 7th win against Vandy to close out the regular season, but they're doing it against a really tough slate of games this year.
Yeah, there's optimism for what the best has looked like, which has been times where they've, they lead the country right now in number of plays per minute. They're the best up-tempo offense in the country, and they can score really quick. People love to see that. They see the potential in that. There's still a little bit of what could have been because the Ole Miss game was a toss-up at the end. There were a couple things that went against them and a couple of bad calls. They should have won that one. Again, if they had found their quarterback earlier, they started Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer, early in the year. Had they started Hooker early in the year, they probably would have been beat Pitt, and that's 2 top 25 wins that you could have had. So if you're the pessimist, you could say what could have been, but I think most Tennessee fans think that will be in future years. They'll finish off games like that.
Adam Sparks, Knoxville News Sentinel on the Vols. The stretch that Tennessee has been in, very similar to what we've seen with some other blue blood programs. We've discussed it. It's got to be frustrating, right? The SEC is very good. We know that, and they really aren't a part of that conversation. Are they just fed up of not winning?
Well, I mean, it's been so long now that I grew up in this state in Tennessee, and they won the national title in '98, and then every year after that, you say, well, they could do it again because they did it in '98, and it's a lot of years since then. And I know I talked to some students at Alabama the other day, some journalism students, and one comment they made to me was, "How does it feel to cover a football team where the program has never been successful?" Because these are kids that are 20 years old and they don't know anything that happened before they were born, and that's sort of the take now. For a number of years, you could go out and recruit at Tennessee and say, "Hey, we won a national title here. We can do it again. Come to Tennessee." Now you're recruiting kids that were not alive last time that happened. So the farther you get from it, I think the more thoughts that creep into Tennessee fans' minds of, will that ever happen again? And I don't know.
As a person who was a freshman at Florida State University in 1998, that comment by your students hurts me.
Yeah, I bet
there's a number. There's a number of teams on that list, and when Texas gets into the conference, that'll be a question there too. It was once. Will it ever be again?
No question. Tennessee, Texas, Nebraska, among many others. Adam, thank you very much from the Knoxville News Sentinel on Tennessee. Appreciate your time. They're a win away from a bowl eligibility under Josh Heupel as the head coach. Coming up next, one of the best games perhaps this weekend, Ohio State and Michigan State. And we'll have Graham